to answer your questions in short, there are two calendars. One is a lunar calendar, one is a solar calendar. So the lunar calendar follows the moon. It's the lunar calendar. And so the dates shift based on the moon cycle. The solar cycle is very consistent. So the fluctuation is within a few hours to maybe a day or so each year. But the fluctuations with the moon are more significant. So on the lunar calendar, you could have a new year starting in January. It could be the beginning of January, the middle, end. It could be February, end of February. It's pretty big fluctuation that it could be. This year, Chinese New Year in 2022 begins February 1st on the lunar calendar. I actually, in my practice, use the solar calendar because there's less fluctuation, maybe a couple hours. And that happens every few years, right? It's very consistent. The sun rises and sets. It's very consistent.
Very much.
And so the February 4th is the solar calendar, Chinese New Year in 2022. And we will be moving from the year of the metal ox to the year of the water tiger. And that is some of the designation that we use from the Tongshu, which is the Chinese calendar. That's what it's called.
That's pretty cool. So you said was it the metal ox?
Yes.
That's interesting. So that's a cool word. And if I saw a metal ox, I will definitely run away.
Well,
just run.
The metal is really the element, right? So the name is Sincho, but when we translate it, it means metal ox, and actually means yin metal ox. So there's some fundamentals in feng shui and Chinese metaphysics that are important to identify. One of them is that there is qi, there is energy. That's part of how we live. That's fundamental to Chinese metaphysics. Another one is the three lucks. The three luck is heaven luck, human luck, and earth luck. And that's a pretty broad topic in itself. And it basically just indicates that heaven luck is what's fated. That's energy that you're born with that you cannot change. Human luck is your free will, the choices that you make. And earth luck is our environment, the places that we live, the physical space that we occupy. And then the other concept, well, another concept is yin yang. And so you will see it as the Chinese Tai Chi, that yin yang symbol, where it's the symbol for harmony and balance and polarity of black and white, male and female, good and bad. The last one to keep in mind in terms of fundamentals for Chinese metaphysics and feng shui is the 5 elements. They are water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And each of these have a numeric value, a behavior, a sound, a taste, part of the body. And you're going to see these in all different components of metaphysics. So it could be Qigong, could be Chinese medicine, could be acupuncture, and of course, feng shui. And the 5 elements represent a type of qi, a type of energy that exists in the universe. And we know through the ancient texts that it has a very predictable behavior. And so when we know what this behavior is and we start putting these pieces together, we can start to make a little bit of a forecast about what to expect.
Gotcha. So that's exactly where I was going with this, was with your specialty in feng shui, does it matter on I want to say the horoscope? I could be using it absolutely.
That's okay. We can call it a horoscope for the moment. That's fine.
Yes. Of like that year, as you said, so for example, would you base your feng shui based off of it being, let's say this year was like the metal ox? Would that be different than next year feng shui, like that concept, or that what things to do during that time?
Yes, and there's 2 parts to that. So one part of it is the qi, how the qi behaves in a physical space. So the kind of energy that we can expect year to year is dictated by a system called flying stars. And it basically says that this qi has behavior and it moves in a very predictable pattern. So we know where it's going to be moving to, when it's going to be moving, and what we can expect based on its behavior and as it visits. So it's sort of like when your in-laws come to visit, you might really get along with your father-in-law, but not so much with your mother-in-law. And you need to know when they're going to come, how long they're going to stay, what foods to prepare, and how to make yourself comfortable, whether you get along with that energy or not. The other side of preparing and sort of forecasting, or giving you a horoscope, if you will, of the year is Chinese astrology. So the flying stars is a system that relates to the physical space, and there's an aspect that can relate to the person, But in order to know how it relates to you, you need to also have your Chinese astrology chart, which there's a ton of calculators out there. There's one on my website that you can use for free. It's known as Bazi or Bazi, B-A-Z-I. And those calculators are great because you can just type in your birthday and poof, out comes a beautiful chart, and it tells you about your elements. It can tell you what your animal signs are. And so when you understand the principles and these fundamentals of luck and yin and yang and 5 elements, and you know about the stars, then you can make a little bit of a prediction about what to expect. And with that information, you can be well informed about the choices that you're most likely to make and how to make different choices to get a different result.
Wow. So this is quite interesting, because I know we touched based on this in our previous talk when we were doing the feng shui, but now it's really, the more I hear you talk about these topics, and the more I realize that in the Western, I'll say, society, we have horoscopes based off of the month, and it changes and so on and so forth, versus the Chinese astrology. You get Chinese astrology, you have qi, you have the year of whatever animal it may be. It really seems like more of a science based.
There is definitely a science for sure, because this
yeah,
is years and years of diagnostic work. I mean, the ancient people didn't have anything to do. There was no technology, right? All they had to do was observe the land and record and figure out the survival of the fittest. Which side of the hill should I be living on in order for my life to be better? And what happens during this year, and how does it affect me versus how does it affect my family versus how does it affect my neighbor? So we're talking about thousands of years of calculations and observations and recording. And I mean, in a lot of ways, the reason that we can make so many specific predictions is because it is very much a science. That all being said, some of the information is very much lineage based. So what is believed or what is taught or what is understood is passed down from generation to generation. So the perspective is can change. That's why you go on the internet and you can see a ton of different horoscopes and predictions in astrology, and it may not apply to you because it may not be looking at the whole picture.
That's very interesting. So I'm gonna get a little bit personal.
Yeah.
Do you follow that? Or like your family base, like in your immediate family, do they follow that as well? Or is it just you yourself that follows that?
Well, me and my husband, well, because I do all the work, right? So me and my husband do this. My dad is not into it. I'm bless my dad. He thinks that I know he loves me, but he's not as interested in this as I am. The kind of things that he's interested in are very different, and that's fine. I mean, I have friends, and I have friends that are my friends and are not interested in me doing feng shui for them. They just want to live their life, and I support them as much as I can. And I have friends that have become my clients, that have become part of my community and believe in what I'm doing and have found really amazing results. And so therefore lean on me to help them when they run into challenges so that things could move smoother.
That's awesome. It's cool. It's good to know. Again, like I know like there's some people that, again, it's that big concept of practice what you preach.
Oh, sure. I can tell you with confidence that if there is a feng shui practitioner out there that says they don't practice, that doesn't even make sense. I mean, if you're a practitioner, you're practicing. And usually we as practitioners sort of fall into this because we're generally trying to fix something that was wrong. And then we came to understand and learn about it so that we could fix our own lives. I certainly didn't start out my life, especially as a kid. Like I didn't know anything about Chinese metaphysics as a kid. This was not part of my vocabulary. I didn't think I was going to grow up being a feng shui practitioner. I fell into it when I was trying to fix my own life. And then circumstances changed and I fell in love with the work and the knowledge and the clients and the results, and here I am.
So I assume, okay, this is again based off of my lovely knowledge of very little feng shui.
Yeah.
If I ever go to a feng shui practitioner and like it's very cluttered and he's just like, yeah, I'm just trying to figure things out, there's just like a huge mess. He's like, yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years. Is that like a big red flag saying maybe I should run away?
No, you should see my office. Like, I know you guys cannot see my office. I'm a little bit of a piler I admit that I'm a little bit of a piler. My feng shui is pretty good, I got to say. but things, filing that thing that's on, I'm looking at the corner of my desk. You can't see. I'm looking at the corner of my desk. Filing that thing away has not become a priority because what's a priority right now is helping my clients and getting ready for Chinese New Year and all the end of the year things that I'm doing. Doesn't mean that my feng shui isn't good. I mean, what cannot be seen on this audio is that my desk is aligned in a very specific way, and that's for feng shui purposes. Clutter is very much a psychological issue. This is what I mean. Like, I'm not making it a priority to file that thing away. And I also tend to collect books. I have a ton of books. Like, this is my jam, is to read books on feng shui, but it might not be your jam. And your jam might be to collect shoes or watches or figurines or do some kind of artwork. And that's cool. That doesn't mean that you can't have good feng shui, even if you're doing that.
That's true. Very, very true. I thought I stumped you on that one, but you got me on
No,
that
I
one.
admit to being a little bit of a piler. I do get to it eventually. Usually when the psychological issue kicks in enough where I'm like, I feel so guilty. I have to file this way, or I can't think about doing the next thing, because there is this concept of fullness versus emptiness in feng shui, the idea that in order for things to come into your life, you need to create space. So this is why people do spring cleaning, right? And we talk about this for Chinese New Year. We say, here's when you should do some spring cleaning and make sure, your space is clean and you've gotten rid of the stuff that you don't need anymore, so you can welcome in the energy of the new year.
I love that. You also mentioned something that you said in getting ready for the Chinese New Year. Is that a long process or a long preparation before you're ready? Or not you, it could be you personally, or when you build your clients' New Year's expectations or New Year's like path?
Yeah, well, so one of the things that happens is that in our Gregorian calendar, January 1st comes around, we're like, oh, it's New Year, I have to have resolutions. But in the Chinese calendar, we're not done with the year that we're in. So what ends up happening is people go, oh, I'm going to have a resolution, I'm going to have a great year, and I'm going to kick it off. But really what you're dealing with is you're dealing with the same energy you're dealing with the previous 11 months. So of course, nothing is going to change until you get to February. So the thing to do is to use that time period to plan the year when it starts in February. February is for Chinese New Year is actually the beginning of the spring season. So when we talk about spring cleaning in the Northern Hemisphere, we might actually think about spring cleaning until maybe March, when things start to thaw a little bit. I'm originally from Ohio, so I'm trying to remember what it feels like for things to thaw in March, because I now live in Phoenix, Arizona. But I'm actually doing spring cleaning in January to prep to welcome in the new energy. So I don't know if that's necessarily a long process, but I think it's helpful to be mindful and use the right timing for the right activities. There's timing to remove things from your house, go through closets and give stuff away and remove things that are broken or that are in disrepair. And when we say spring cleaning, that's one aspect of it, but can literally mean like, I will pull out my refrigerator and clean behind my refrigerator and my stove and the couch and wipe the baseboards and, sort of a deep cleaning so that I can feel like when the new energy is coming, there isn't like dust bunnies everywhere. And and it can also mean electronic cleaning. It can mean going through my email box and deleting hundreds of unread emails and unsubscribing to newsletters. And so there's different ways to do spring cleaning. The more of that you can do at the right timing, the more favorable it'll be.
That's very, very true. That's one thing I like to do on like when I have like some downtime, is just go through those unwanted emails and just unsubscribe. It sucks because you go to the store and they always get you. They're always like, oh yeah, if you sign up now, you'll get like 10% off. But they don't say like, hey, we will bombard you with like 50 emails every like 2 days. You're like, oh, crap, what did I sign up for?
Right. And it seems like it's harder to unsubscribe these days. I feel like I unsubscribed from a lot of stuff during Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and it's now the middle of December and that 10-day window is gone. And I really feel like I should not be getting these emails anymore. So I have to unsubscribe again. I know your store. I know your brand. I've been shopping with you for over 20 years. I know how to find you. You don't have to send me that many emails. I understand the marketing behind it. I get it. It's just not for me.
Yeah, it's like those unwanted phone calls, like those duct cleaners that keep calling you and over again. You're like, seriously, just stop.
Yeah.
Or those lovely so-called Nigerian prince that they want you to send them money. You're like, no.
Can you do me a favor? I need you to get some gift cards for me because I can't get out of the house. That was fun. That phishing actually happened. Anyway, back to Chinese New Year.
Exactly. This is what I love about these conversations, because it can go anywhere, but it's for the fun of it anyways.
For the fun of it.
Exactly. New Year's, and this is the biggest thing as well for me personally, and you mentioned something called goals. Everyone has these New Year's goals or New Year's resolution that they aim for. In well, back to the Chinese New Year and even feng shui, is that followed the same way, as in come New Year's, we have to set up some goals? I know you mentioned earlier, but what happens if those goals are not met or resolutions are not met? Does it just go on to the next year? Like, is it just normal, like saying, hey, okay, well, you didn't make it, let's move on, or let's build a plan, therefore you're able to achieve it?
Well, I think that our goals change and shift based on what we're able to achieve. And a lot of that is circumstantial, right? If I have a plan to go on a trip, but my house had a major leak and I have to have it repaired and I can't leave the house because I need to be here for contractors, then that trip isn't going to happen. And that leak is beyond my control. Mm-hmm. So therefore I might have to readjust my expectations and readjust my goals. And I don't, this might not be answering your question properly, but the energy that the experiences that we have and the influences that we encounter each year really dictate what we're able to achieve. And some of that is the energy that we are interacting with and the people that we're interacting with. So it's helpful to understand how the energy of the year will impact you, which is why we say, oh, you should look at your own Chinese astrology chart and see what the energy means for you, so you can set your expectations accordingly. It's sort of like driving on, like, if you're driving on the road in a car, you want to know if that road is going to be smooth or if it's going to be bumpy, because if you have the choice of cars, I mean, it would be great to go in a Ferrari. It feels good. The wind in your hair, you can go really fast. You get where you want to go smoothly. It's great, right? But life is not always like that. Sometimes the road gets slippery. Sometimes there are potholes. And so maybe I should go out in my Range Rover this time of year, or the whole year, depending on what's going on. There may be a season or a month that is better than another. Sometimes we need to put chains on our tires to go in the snow. It depends on what's happening. And if you know what is coming, then you can be prepared so that you aren't driving on a slippery road in the winter where you should be in a Range Rover, but you're in your Ferrari. And that's not going to be very safe. And it's not going to feel good because you want to go fast. Mm-hmm. You know, you got to go really slow. So the more that you can prepare, the better off you are. And that's true for all kinds of things, whether it's health related or relationship related or business related, career, whatever it is that you've got going on in your life. So it's helpful. This is why there's so much talk. I mean, there's millions of people all over the world that are looking at this so that they can shape their lives. What happens though, that's a little bit challenging. It's sort of like your New Year's resolution, right? You make a resolution, you want to know what the energy is, but if you don't follow through, then it's not so meaningful. So part of the culture is to understand the energy that's coming, look at it seasonally, and plan for incremental steps that you can take throughout the year to get to your goal. So if my goal, for example, is to increase my business by 20%, what am I going to do in quarter one based on the energy that's there to support me? What am I going to do in quarter two? What am I going to do in quarter three? And I can evaluate how successful I am as I get to those mile markers. And at the end of the year, I can go, did I increase my business 20%? Did I only increase it 17%? Am I going to call that a loss? No. But what am I going to do to get to that other little bit the next year? And so you're going to continue to evaluate.
I love that. You also mentioned something in regards to increases of business. And I also think about the biggest thing that's happening now is a pandemic. I assume, and this is just my full assumption, is that with how crazy the world is and so on and so forth, I would like to say, have you seen that increase of people looking towards using feng shui and going around Chinese New Year's in your business? Yeah. Oh,
yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, who could have anticipated what was going to happen in 2020 with the pandemic? And it's still going on in 21. And 22 looks like it's going to feel, in a lot of ways, it's going to feel very similar, because the energy does not support a complete halt to the viral behavior and how we are reacting. That being said, there's a good chance that we will start to look at the process differently. We need the energy to continue to evolve in order to get a handle on this. So people can make money, people can do well in business, even during a time of crisis. And that largely has to do with the elements as it relates to you. So if you are somebody who benefited in your 4 pillars of destiny chart, your Chinese astrology chart, from metal element, you could have done really, really well the last couple of years. Now that metal element is going to be missing in 22. So yes, we're going into the year of the tiger, and that metal element is going to be missing. So if you need that element in your chart, you did well the last couple of years, you may want to therefore start preparing to make some adjustments in your business to do things differently, so you can either continue to do well or make a change. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that, because I know a lot of people have switched their mindset and the way they think because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I also believe that a lot of people, again, as you mentioned, invested a lot into the pandemic, other businesses around them as well. But I just wondering, based off of what people are going towards, because I feel like a lot of people are going, I guess, either A, more spiritual, or B, either leaning towards, you know what, YOLO, as in just you only live once, and they're just spending and going on a huge spending shopping spree and so on and so forth. But again, everyone lives their own life the way they are. Yeah. The reason why I mentioned in your practice especially, it's that, you know what, pandemic happens. Let me find, this is, I'll say, for the pandemic, and especially for myself, this was more of a retune, I find.
Right. For well, because so many of us had to be away from people, and so we were going more inward. So what the beauty of this is, everything is cyclical. So actually, you can look back on a 60-year calendar. You can look back 60 years and see what happened 60 years ago. 1960, 1961. Now we're coming potentially to the energy of what things felt like in 1962, which would give us clues about what we could expect in 22. You mentioned spirituality, which is really interesting, because the water tiger, which we call a pillar, and this is the energy of 22, is the year of the yang water tiger, is the animal sign, is actually what's called a spiritual pillar. It's one of what's called 10 spiritual days. So there are 10 combinations of animals and animal signs and water and elements of the 5 elements. And one of them is yang water tiger. And it indicates greater interest in spirituality, greater interest in community, interest in seeing things differently, that there's something greater than us, right? That there's something, where is our place in the universe, and deciding whether or not we're going to operate from a place of fear or from a place of love. And that is very much a spiritual practice. So my forecast, horoscope prediction, if you will, is that more of that is going to be happening, so that we are evaluating our values. And it may come from a place of fear. It may be that people are going to stand on their principles a little bit more, and those emotions may be strong. They may not turn into fighting so much, discord, the way that we saw, like, so much fighting and like guns and war and calamity, because metal element is very much about fighting, whereas those emotions are still going to run high, but it's unlikely that there'll be so much destruction, if you will. And we'll be thinking about it from a more spiritual perspective. So it will feel very different in that regard. People instead are going to be wanting to look at the concept of spiritual enlightenment. So many people have died all over the planet that people are going to go through the grief process and start to think about human emotions in a different way, what it means to be spiritually enlightened, what it means to be compassionate and kind and giving to humanity. All of those things are part of spiritual exploration, which I expect we will see more of next year.
So you're giving me good hope.
There's hope.
Exactly. You give me good hope, because you pretty much, from based on what I'm listening to, 2022, February, not January, but February of 2022 should be a good year for us.
It can be, right? So it's going to depend on your chart, which is why it's important to look at your own 4 pillars destiny chart. Go to the calculator and check it out, and you'll look at your chart, and it's color coded. So the colors, water is blue, green is wood, gray is metal, red is fire, and brown is earth. And so when you look at your own chart, you can see, does your chart have more colors than one and versus the other? And if your chart has a lot of red for fire, that's great, because the water element is pretty cold. I mean, the ocean itself, like, unless you're right on the beach in Maui and when it's 90 degrees outside, the water's, pretty warm at that point. But if you go a little bit deeper into the ocean, it can get pretty chilly pretty quick, right? So next year's temperature is a little bit cold. So people who have fire in their chart are going to be more desirable. They're going to be more sought after. They're going to bring hope, and they're going to bring warmth, and people are going to be attracted to that. If your chart doesn't have any water, there's no blue in your chart, I'm just using that as an example. If there's no blue in your chart, or there's no green, because green is wood element, the next year may actually really be beneficial for you, because the year may naturally bring you elements that bring balance to your chart. So it's a little bit of an intricate process, but you can see pretty quickly how things can be beneficial or not. Like next year is the year of the water tiger. That's the year. And the month that we're beginning is also the water tiger. That's also very interesting. Another super fascinating component of what happens next year is that the month pillar for each month next year is the same as the following 12 years. So we start with the Yang water tiger month. The next month in March of 22 is Yin water rabbit.
Oh,
and 23 is going to be the Yin water rabbit. So April of 22 is the Yang wood dragon. 24, the year is the Yang wood dragon. So we are going to start to see a little bit of a preview, if you will, about what the energy will look like for the next 12 years, which is why this is going to, I think this year is going to be magical in a lot of ways, because it's going to start a ripple effect of what we're going to get to experience. Everything is a pattern in feng shui.
So it seems. It's like I said, this is quite interesting. Again, this is just something that when our first conversation starting from feng shui, I was like, I never really looked into it, to be honest with you. Never really.
Well, yeah, it wasn't part of it was on your radar for anything.
No, it wasn't. Since then, honestly, I've been looking at things to pretty much the art of feng shui, just declutter my life a little bit more. I know we talked about it a little bit. So I'm like, okay, so I'm starting to see that, again, it's that box to get rid of, and which I have like 2 boxes. So I was quite happy with what I have to do with that.
Yeah.
In regards to that as well, just getting a brand new phone. We talked about this earlier. Something that was slow, yes, I loved it, and just changing over to something that's a little bit faster, a little bit something that's able to give me more peace of mind, to say, even though I'm struggling right now to learn it, it's okay. But those small things, it's making my life a little bit easier.
I really spent a lot of time on feng shui, but a lot of predictions and conversations about next year is that the feng shui energy is in its home position. So the flying stars are flying back home, and there's a lot of talk that there's some areas of the house that are more auspicious than others, and generally that's true. And next year there's a lot more usable spaces in the house than other years, because there's not as much discord, if you will, because the stars are flying home. And it's important to understand your own energy and what you need in your chart, so that you can identify what's the best to use and what's going to be the most favorable for you versus just what's okay. And that's really what a feng shui audit is for, and what a consultation is for. And I think it's helpful to get to know your own chart and get to know your own home if it's of interest to you. If it's not of interest, that's why you hire a practitioner, so they can just tell you. Because I've got tons of books that I've read over the years, and it takes a lot of time. It's not for everybody. That's why you call for help.
Very, very true. And it's just like, for example, being a brain surgeon, you can read one book, it doesn't mean you're a professional. No. You have to do it every single day. And like you said, you have books upon books and years upon years experience into this topic or profession, which is fantastic.
I think people can have a good year every year. I think it very much is about mindset. It's very much about what changes you're willing to make. even if things are inconvenient in order to keep things smoother. It's not real that life isn't full of challenges. That's not real. Like, we want people to solve our problems for us. That's natural. And if you do have challenges, it's helpful to know where to look for help so that you can resolve things smoother and faster and also in your favor as much as possible. And that's part of the aim of feng shui.